Hi guys, it's Danielle and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in spring. So it is the last day of November and obviously by the time this goes up we're going to probably be a few days, maybe a couple of weeks into December. Depends how good I am at editing and uploading. So I thought it would be the perfect time to wrap up all of the books that I read in spring. I did this for winter and it worked out pretty well, so I figured I would keep up with the seasonal wrap-ups rather than monthly wrap-ups. If you do want to know what books I read in winter, I will leave that video down below. I read so many books in winter and spring was not my reading season. I still managed to read 16 books in spring, so not a terrible amount, but I also feel like I could have read so much more. I think what helped me a lot in winter were audiobooks, and I just don't think I was listening to audiobooks in spring as much as I was in winter, so I think that's what really let me down. But anyway, since I'm talking about so many books, I feel like I need to kind of get a wriggle on and just jump into it. So let's get started. So starting with September, I ended up reading 5 books in September. Let's dive in to the books. What are you doing with your hands? I don't know. So the first book that I read in September, I actually started in August and wanted to finish in August, but it didn't happen because this book is quite chunky and it took me quite a while to read this book. Anyway, the first book is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This was pretty much the one book that I wanted to read this year. Every single year that I've had it on my bookshelves, I have put it on my TBR, and every single year I have not read it until now. Unfortunately, I think the hype completely ruined this book for me. I was expecting absolutely amazing things with this book because it's The Book Thief and everybody absolutely loves it. I really loved the premise and I really loved the writing. The writing is really beautiful, but I just, apart from that, I didn't really feel anything. I didn't connect with the characters as I was hoping I would, but because I had such high expectations, I feel like it just really fell flat for me, unfortunately, and I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. The next book was another book that I really wanted to read this year purely because I just wanted to finish this series, Always and Forever Lara Jean by Jenny Han. So I basically wanted to read this because I had watched the movie and really loved it, and I kind of just wanted to dive back into the world and see how it would all end. And not gonna lie, I was pretty disappointed with this one. I feel like this book was completely and utterly useless. Like, nothing happened in this story. I feel like it was just really unnecessary and we could have just finished on the second book instead of having another one. I don't know what the point of this book was really at all. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but I could probably lower it to like 2.5. The next book that I read was Wildcard by Marie Lu. This one was one of my most anticipated releases for this year. I absolutely adored what's the first book called? Warcross, one of my favorite books of the year last year, and so I was highly anticipating this book. I did really enjoy this one. I liked that it started off straight where Warcross finished, so that it kind of rebooted my memory for Warcross because I did read it like over a year ago. It was full of action and drama, which was the same as Warcross, but unfortunately one of the main things that I loved about Warcross was the games and like the virtual reality aspect, and this book didn't have that as much, so I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't have that kind of really cool aspect in it. But apart from that, I still really enjoyed this book. It wrapped up the world really nicely, and the story and the characters I really loved, and I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I do have a review of this one up on my blog, so if you are interested, I will leave that linked below. The next book that I read in September was Risk by Fleur Ferris. This book focuses on cyber safety, and these 2 best friends start talking to this guy online, and then one of the girls goes to meet him and disappears. I really enjoyed this book. Just like Fleur Ferris's other books, it's super fast paced and super easy to read. I did find the romance to be extremely insta-lovey, and it was quite ridiculous. Just could not deal with it at times. It felt very like teenage rom-com. I just met this guy and I'm now doodling our names together in love hearts on my journal and like basically planning our wedding. Like it just felt really kind of a bit ridiculous. I also found it a little bit predictable, but I found the message behind it and the whole like focus on cyber safety to be really, really realistic and really quite confronting. This really kind of highlights the dangers of the internet and how that if you're not careful, things can go extremely badly and extremely wrong really quickly. It was definitely a very confronting and real book, but I did still really enjoy it and I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the last book that I read in September was again another one that I'd been wanting to read for quite a while. It had been on my TBR for a while, and it was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is the first book that I've read by Patrick Ness. Not gonna lie, wasn't a huge fan of this book. I found like the story itself super unique and intriguing, and I really liked how it explored grief and illness, like how it did it in such a unique way. But I just, again, similar with The Book Thief, I think the hype killed this book for me and it really sucks. I feel like I could have really loved this book, but because so many people had been hyping it up and like raving about it, I had super high expectations and they just weren't met, unfortunately. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. So that was everything that I read in September. Moving on to October. October, I read 6 books and DNF'd 1 book. Almost DNF'd 2 books, and if you know me, I do not DNF books. I will always push through even if I do not like them. But I think I have kind of gotten to a point now in my reading, if I'm not enjoying a book, I do not want to waste my time on it anymore. I'd rather pick up another book and read it instead of wasting my time reading a book that I'm just not enjoying. Anyway, I DNF'd a book this month. It doesn't happen very often. So on to the books that I read in October. The first book that I read is again another book that I've been wanting to read for ages. It's been on my TBR again for a while, and again it's a really hyped and popular book, and it was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This one I listened to on audiobook and I've really enjoyed it. The audiobook for this book and the sequel is amazing. I highly recommend picking them up. I tried to lower my expectations for this book because I knew if I went in with extremely high expectations, I wouldn't enjoy it as much, and I really loved this book. It was absolutely amazing. I can definitely see why this is so many people's favorite book. The writing in this book was absolutely amazing. Laini Taylor's writing is so stunning and beautiful, and I'm in awe of her writing. It's just like, I aspire to be such a beautiful writer, honestly. I have read the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy as well, so I knew that her writing was beautiful. But yeah, I just, the way she creates worlds and characters is just amazing, and I just adore her writing and will probably read basically anything she writes. In saying that, I did find the start of this book a little bit slow and it didn't really grab my attention straight away, so it took me a little while to get into this book, but I was hooked from probably like 100 pages in or so. I loved it. I loved the characters and the world and the story. It was so beautiful and just entertaining, and I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. So definitely still really enjoyed this book. The next book that I read in September was What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This was another one that I was really anticipating. I've really loved Becky Albertalli's books and I've really enjoyed Adam Silvera's books. So hearing that they had a book together, I was super excited. Unfortunately, was not a huge fan of this one. I found the romance to be quite insta-lovey and also just a little bit stalkery. They had like a meet cute and then kind of were obsessing about each other for like a few weeks afterward. Just, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Both the main characters annoyed the crap out of me multiple times throughout this story. I don't know. I just couldn't deal with some of the things that they did or said, and yeah, it just wasn't for me, and I ended up giving that one 3 stars as well. And the next book is the book that I DNF'd, and it was Grim Lovelies by Megan Shepherd. I was really quite excited to read this one. It sounded really intriguing. It's got like changelings in it, and it is set in Paris, and it just sounded really cool. I got about 180 pages into this book, so still like a fair chunk through, like about halfway. It was taking me forever to read, and I got to the point where I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna put this book down and pick up something else, because I'm just not enjoying this book. I'm not connecting to the characters. I'm not obsessed with the story. I'm just really bored, and I'm gonna pick up something else instead. So that's what I did. The next book that I read, it literally came in the mail and I read it on the same day. It is Saga Volume 9 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I feel like I have talked enough about this book already. I vlogged it and I also hauled it recently, so I've talked plenty about this book. It was amazing. I almost cried at the end. I love this series so much. The artwork is just stunning and it's just so much fun. I definitely recommend picking it up if you're wanting a great graphic novel series. It's so good. The next book, again, I have talked a little bit about this one. I vlogged it and I unboxed it and I talked about it in my book haul. It is Wundersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is the sequel to Nevermore. This is a middle grade fantasy magical story about Morrigan Crow, who basically escapes her abusive family to go to Nevermore. She basically has to complete these trials to be accepted into the Wondrous Society. And this is obviously the sequel, so I'm not going to go into too much because I don't want to spoil. I do have a full review of this book on my blog. I will link it below. I think I also have a review of Nevermore. I'll link them below if I do. I don't know, I can't remember. I'm going to be that person and say that if you love Harry Potter, you will really love this series. I don't know how many books we're getting in this series, but it's already amazing and I'm already sold on it. I loved this book. I loved the first book. It's like the magic of Harry Potter and it's just so wonderful, and I highly recommend picking this up if you are wanting fun-filled adventure story. It's just great. And I definitely recommend picking this up. Obviously, pick up the first book first. But anyway, great book. Loved it. Gave it 4.5 stars. The next book that I read in October was I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. Again, another one that I had kind of high expectations for, and another one that so many people loved, and another one that has been on my TBR for many years that I finally got around to reading. This is the book that I almost DNF'd as well. I had heard such great things about it and I was like, surely this book gets better in the second half of the book, but the first half of this book absolutely dragged. Like, I was so bored, and the characters, mainly the guy character in this book, I was just not a huge fan of. He was super annoying and whiny and I just did not like him. In his defense, he is 13 in this book, so like a 13-year-old boy going through puberty and stuff, like obviously he's gonna be annoying. I was sitting there and I was contemplating if I was gonna keep reading or if I was gonna DNF it. I really didn't want to DNF it because I really wanted to give it a go. And I'm so happy that I did not DNF it, because the second half of this book totally made up for the first half. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It really turned around halfway through, but that first half was just not great. I did end up guessing the plot twist for this book. Apart from that and the fact that the first half of the book was not great, I did enjoy it. I really enjoyed Jude, who is the other main character, and I just really enjoyed how the story ended up developing and ending. I just really liked it by the end of it. So I'm happy that I didn't DNF. And the last book that I read in October was Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. If you don't know, this is just a collection of short stories that Leigh Bardugo's written that are set in her Grishaverse. I absolutely love Six of Crows. I enjoyed Shadow and Bone, not as much as Six of Crows, but I still really did enjoy it. I was looking forward to picking this one up and I just wanted something quick and easy. I listened to this on audio and also kind of flipped through because it's got like artwork in it, and basically if you read along, there's images that kind of grow around the text, and when you get to the end of the story they make up a full image like that, and the artwork is really pretty. I didn't want to miss out on the artwork and the pictures that the story created, so I kind of flipped through whilst I was listening to it, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I really love Leigh Bardugo's writing. It's super beautiful and detailed and lovely. I enjoyed each story. I didn't absolutely love any, I didn't hate any, they were all enjoyable. I think my favourite was probably the last story, I think, which was about the two sisters. It was called When Water Sank to Fire. I think that was my favourite story. Ended up giving that one 4 stars because it was good. It wasn't amazing, I didn't absolutely love it, but I really enjoyed it still. So now moving on to November. November was not my best reading month. I only read 5 books. But I also had a bit on in November. I went on a cruise for 10 days, so that affected my reading a little bit. I did still read while I was on the cruise, but just not as much as I would have liked. But anyway, let's get into the books. What are you doing with your hands? Stop it, just stop it. The best book that I read in November was Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. Again, I listened to the audiobook of this one because it was the same narrator that Strange the Dreamer had, and I really enjoyed it. Again, I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I didn't enjoy it as much as Strange the Dreamer, but I did still enjoy it, if that made sense. Again, I found this to be a bit slow at the start and took me a little while to get into, but because I already knew the characters, it was a little bit easier to get into, but I felt like not a lot was happening. I still really love this book. It was amazing. Again, Laini Taylor's writing is just magical and I'm obsessed. I think Stranger Dreamer was better, but I really enjoyed the series as a whole. I think it was beautiful and I don't have any super bad things to say about these books. So the next book that I read was A Shadow's Breath by Nicole Hayes. This is a Love Osway novel. This one I was kind of hoping I'd really enjoy. A lot of my friends had read and really loved this book, so again, kind of high expectations. Again, they weren't really met. I just didn't really connect to the characters with this one. I think that's kind of why I wasn't really a huge fan of it. In saying that, I really liked the way that the story was told. It's told in past and present, like alternating each chapter, and I really liked that. It's getting really hot in here. Anyway, there was also quite a big plot twist that I didn't really see coming, so that was great, but again, I wasn't a huge fan of it. It was good, it wasn't great, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next book that I read, I actually read on my cruise, and it was Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan. Before I say anything, it does have a trigger warning for violence and sexual abuse. This one, I did really enjoy the concept and enjoyed the characters, but I think the thing that kind of fell flat with me for this one was the romance. Like, I did enjoy it, but it kind of felt forced to me purely because I feel like there wasn't enough build up. Like, they'd met and then it was kind of just skipped to them being in love with each other, and I don't know, I feel like it didn't kind of progress nicely. But apart from that, the story itself was enjoyable. Ended up giving it 4 stars. I will be reviewing this one. Hopefully it's already up, and I will leave it linked below if you want to know more of my thoughts. The next book that I read was Female of the Species by Mindy McGuinness. I'd been wanting to read this book for such a long time. I'd heard nothing but amazing things about it. I don't know what I really expected with this book. I don't think I knew much going into it. And even when I bought it, I don't think I knew what it was really about, apart from people loved it and feminism. But this book was a lot darker than I thought it was gonna be. It was very grim, very dark, and again, this book has trigger warnings for violence and sexual abuse. I really enjoyed this story. Like, I feel weird saying I loved it because of what it talks about and how dark it was. Basically, this book is from 3 different perspectives. The first one is Alex, who is known in this town as Anna's sister, and Anna is a girl who was raped and killed. And Alex also has extreme anger issues. And then we've got the 2 other main characters. We've got PK, who basically is just known as the preacher's kid. That's what PK stands for. And she befriends Alex at an animal shelter. And we've also got Jack, who starts to notice Alex at school, and there's a bit of a romance that blossoms between the 2. And so their whole world basically changes from meeting Alex. Like I said, it's very dark, and I wasn't expecting it to be so dark. I don't know why, when literally the first line on the blurb says Alex Craft knows how to kill someone. There are like parts in the book where you kind of smile because it's quite sweet, but most of it is quite dark and grim and just quite a roller coaster of emotions. You will fly through it. It's super easy to read, and you could probably finish it in one sitting, but I still really enjoyed this book. It was so different and so unique and gripping, and such a different take on feminism and rape culture, and I just really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars. I could not fault it. Probably not a book for everyone, so I would be wary going into it. It is very dark. There's a lot of violence. There is sexual abuse in it, so just be wary going in if that's something that would trigger you. But it was just such a great book. I really enjoyed this one. I haven't been giving out many 5-star ratings this year, so if I'm giving a 5-star rating for this book, it means it's good. The last book that I read in November is More Happier Than Not by Anna Silvera. This is again was another book that was really hyped. Again, another book that I'd been wanting to read for ages, and another book that did not live up to its hype. I don't know, this book I have really mixed feelings about. Like, I wanted to really enjoy this book, but I just didn't. Basically, the main character who wants to forget that he's gay. This couldn't sit right. It really just didn't sit right with me, and I feel like it could be pretty problematic to some people, and I think I have heard that, but I also have heard that a lot of people really loved this book, especially people in the LGBT community. So I don't know, I'm not the right person to say whether or not this is a problematic book. It didn't sit right with me, and I just couldn't enjoy it because of this. Unfortunately, it just was not the book for me, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. But yeah, they are all the books that I read in spring. Let me know if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts were. Also, let me know how many books you read in spring, or even this year if you want to go big. I am currently sitting at 65 books, which I'm really happy with. I want to get to 70. I also want to read 5 more books to get my physical TBR under 100 anyway, because that's my main goal for this year, and I'm so close. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.